When making a decision or taking action, an organization is never completely neutral or indifferent to the context in which it operates. I am Camille Marquette, Climate and Peacebuilding Advisor at International Alert, and today we will speak about why and how to apply conflict sensitivity. So as I just said, any intervention happens and will interact in complex ways with the social context it takes place in. This is also true for the water sector. It could be a policy implemented by a technical agency to preserve water quality, which could challenge traditional water management of some communities or go against specific beliefs they have. It could also be the construction of a dam or other irrigation structure. Such infrastructure can drastically affect water availability for downstream communities. It could be an agricultural investment, and a stark example of that is the large-scale plantation of cotton fields in Uzbekistan by Soviet leaders that led to serious land degradation. But it can also be a humanitarian project where the choice of beneficiaries can create a perception of exclusion by other actors. For example, a project supporting rice cultivation would be perceived being detrimental for people cultivating other kinds of crops. In fragile and conflict-affected contexts, such perception matter even more. Conflict sensitivity is understanding that what we do and how we do it is dependent on the context in which we operate, and that it has impacts on this context, positive impacts and negative impacts. It is a method through which each actor can identify these impacts and act accordingly. Conflict sensitivity is an enhanced risk assessment that builds on the do no harm approach used by humanitarian and development communities. It is a forecast exercise based on the recognition that a project may harm the society where it is implemented while achieving its objectives. So the do no harm approach is ensuring that one does not unintentionally create tensions, disputes, conflicts, or violence. Conflict sensitivity goes a step further and strives to identify how the intervention can do more good. To engage in this exercise, we need to follow key principles. We need to recognize the complexity of the linkages between water resources and power relations within society. We need to be ready to challenge our assumptions and our own bias, which calls for honesty and humility in recognizing the extent or the limitation of our interventions. And finally, we need to ensure that we are open to learning and demonstrate intercultural sensitivity. So conflict sensitivity takes 3 steps. 1, understand the context in which we act. 2, unfold the effects of your action in this context. And 3, adapt our action to reduce negative impacts and augment positive impacts. Let's unpack them further. So we'll use throughout the example of a foreign investor establishing a horticulture farm in Eastern Africa. The land had been expropriated from local farmers who, after negotiations, received compensation for a 10-year lease. So in this context, what kind of steps are necessary to ensure that this investment is accepted locally and doesn't disrupt life in local communities? So the first step is understanding the context in which you operate. You do that through conflict analysis. That is, understanding the grievances and power relations at play around water access and use. So in our example, you would learn that the employment situation is difficult and that youth in particular struggles to make both ends meet. You could also learn that there is specific dynamic between local authorities and different groups, self-subsistence farmers, landowners, etc. You need your analysis to be regularly updated, and especially when there are key changes in the context. In this example, it could be food price shock, a political change, a security challenge, and you would answer to this by agreeing on regular consultation with different stakeholders, farmers association, local government, market authorities, to monitor whether there is feedback on the farm operation or security concerns in the wider region. So the second step is understanding how your intervention acts on the context, and vice versa, looking at how the social situation and security trends impact or limitate your action. This step is basically reviewing the conflict analysis, but adding your organization as an actor within this context. You could ask yourself the following questions. Who will implement the project and for whom? Who will benefit from it? Who is left out? Who would be negatively affected? What could go wrong in your proposed options, especially in regards to conflict dynamics? For water-related interventions, you could ask more specifically, what about the impact on upstream and downstream communities? What about different types of water users? Those who need water for sanitation, for cattle, for crops, or for energy generation. So this list of questions is not exhaustive and should be adapted to each context. In our East African example, you could find out that compensated farmers were all from a specific ethnic group, thus feeding into resentment between groups. Or you could identify that there is a risk that farm operation would cause pollution to neighboring water bodies through fertilizer or water discharge. This in turn could fuel resentment toward your operation. So the third and last step of conflict sensitivity is to act through identifying strategies to reduce negative impacts and encourage positive impacts. You could do that at the planning stage by defining indicators to monitor, or you could do that during the implementation phase. So you could review the way you conduct activities, the way you recruit, or how or from whom you gather information. In our example, it could be regularly reviewing and revisiting the condition of the lease, or conducting regular town hall events to ensure acceptability of the operation, or in being transparent about hiring requirements or policy. To conclude, a reflection on conflict sensitivity should not be a solitary exercise. You should use interactive methods and a participatory approach to ensure that voices from different stakeholders are heard. This would only increase the effectiveness of your intervention.